Democracies, like dictatorships, are run by humans. And sometimes the lure of power can induce the democrat to subtly cross over onto dictatorship. This usually entails manipulating the system to ensure full control over the legislature and the judiciary. And one such democrat was India's Indira Gandhi, who in 1975 made that subtle shift and imposed an internal emergency upon India, which lasted approximately 2 years. Welcome to The Why in History. I am Ajay Kaul, and today we cover the circumstances that led to the imposition of the emergency in India and the economic, social, and political impact. The internal emergency imposed upon India refers to a 21-month period from June 25, 1975 to March 21, 1977, when Indira Gandhi was bestowed with the authority to rule by decree, allowing elections to be suspended and civil liberties to be curbed. So let's start with evaluating the build-up to the emergency. Between 1971 and 1974, India witnessed a downturn in the economy. The economy was hit partly due to the war with Pakistan and the resulting influx of refugees from East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh, and most importantly, the global oil crisis of 1973. The rise in the global oil prices had a ripple effect, which impacted fertilizers, which led to agricultural production getting impacted, and agriculture at that time was the mainstay of India's economy. The problems around agricultural production were compounded by a serious drought, and on top of that, the nation's unemployment also rose along with the price of staple goods. And the rise in the price of staple goods led to factory workers organizing large-scale strikes, protesting the price hikes and demanding pay raises. The opposition saw an opening in this chaos and provided full support for student protests as well as factory strikes. In fact, prominent opposition leader and Gandhian Jayaprakash Narayan actually led the mass student protests against the perceived governmental corruption. But the situation came to a head on June 12, 1975, when the Allahabad High Court in the state of Uttar Pradesh ruled that Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had committed some election violations during the 1971 elections. Indira Gandhi had won the 1971 Lok Sabha election from the Rai Bareli constituency in Uttar Pradesh, convincingly defeating opposition leader Raj Narayan. Raj Narayan, though, challenged her election, alleging electoral malpractices because Indira Gandhi had used government officials for personal election-related work. Indira Gandhi was convicted of this charge, and Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha handed a courageous verdict disqualifying Indira Gandhi from parliament and imposing a 6-year ban on her holding any elected post. So the law required Indira Gandhi to step down from the post of Prime Minister. So Indira Gandhi called her inner circle to brainstorm potential options to get around this directive. On June 18, 1975, Congress members of Parliament belonging to Indira Gandhi's party met and pledged their loyalty to her and her continued leadership. In this meeting, that famous slogan, Indira is India and India is Indira, was uttered by party president D.K. Barua. Now, we do not know for sure whether he was inspired by the Rudolf Hess 1934 declaration at the Nuremberg Party rally, where Rudolf is supposed to have announced, "Hitler is Germany and Germany is Hitler." However, the most palatable option to get around the Allahabad High Court directive was proposed by Siddharth Shankar Ray, the Chief Minister of West Bengal, and that was to declare an internal emergency. Article 352 of the Indian Constitution endows the President with the power to proclaim an emergency if they are satisfied that a grave national danger exists. Now, emergency had been declared in India earlier, once during the 1962 China aggression and the second during the 1971 Bangladesh War. But both these times, the reason was because of external aggression. And the justification Siddharth Shankar Ray was providing for the imposition of emergency in 1975 was that there was a threat to national security, this time because of internal unrest and instability. So on the night of June 25, 1975, Indira Gandhi, along with Siddharth Shankar Ray, met with India's President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed and urged him to declare an internal emergency. Wait, the President of the country agreed without questioning them? Well, the position of India's President is very ceremonial, and the President is elected by the elected representatives across the center and the states. So most of the time, it is the ruling party that is able to manipulate who gets elected as the president. And in this case too, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed was basically a congressman, meaning belonging to the same party as Indira Gandhi. So he owed the presidential position to her. So he did not have any reason to question. He was indebted to her. The President of India in 1975 was more loyal to his political party than the Constitution. The Article 352, which gave the President of India the authority to impose an emergency when India or part of it was threatened by war, external aggression, or internal disturbance, was actually borrowed from the Constitution of the German Weimar Republic. The German Weimar Republic? What is that? Well, the Weimar Republic is the name given to the German government between the end of the imperial period, that is 1918, and the beginning of Nazi Germany in 1933. So Article 352 was borrowed from the German constitution that existed in that period. So post the meeting with the president, the emergency proclamation was signed around 11:45 p.m. on June 25, 1975. As soon as the emergency proclamation was signed, two major events were set in motion. The first one was the mass arrests of all political leaders from the opposition and others. And these included Jayaprakash Narayan, Morarji Desai, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. The second event was the suppression of the press. Immediately after the proclamation, the Delhi Electric Supply Undertaking, or DESU, was ordered to cut off electricity to all the newspapers located on the Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg, which is where a majority of the newspapers' offices and printing presses were located at that time. The aim was to make sure that no news was published the following morning. Actually, quite a few newspaper editors and correspondents were also arrested, along with the political leaders. And with the printing presses crippled, the Prime Minister herself announced the proclamation of the emergency at 8 a.m. on June 26, 1975, via All India Radio. Indira Gandhi claimed that vested interests had threatened the national security and they had the backing of the press, which was distorting facts and spreading lies. So how did the newspapers react? Well, they started printing blank pages or pages with quotes from famous authors. But this practice too was banned by the government because the censorship rules required that no publication could reveal that it was censored. In other words, you will print what I want you to, and you will not complain about it. So, what was the immediate impact of the emergency upon the country as a whole? At a high level, emergency was basically a classical dictatorship, which meant at the surface level, there was greater efficiency in the functioning of the various machineries of the government. Almost immediately, the protests and the disruption stopped. And since the fundamental rights were on hold, the average worker got serious about boosting productivity at work. So a lot of public utilities like railways and airlines, which were synonymous with delays and inefficiencies, suddenly started becoming more operationally efficient. In fact, key economic indicators showed commendable growth during the financial year 1975 through 76. The gross national product, or GNP, grew at an impressive rate of 8.9% during this time, compared to a dismal 0.8% during the previous year. Agricultural production grew at 15.6%, while food grain production grew at a massive 21%. Similarly, on the industrial front, the industrial production grew at an impressive 6.1%, and exports grew at 21.4%. Inflation too seemed to be in check. During the year, the wholesale prices showed a decline of 1.1% as compared to a whopping rise of 25.2% in the preceding year. Not surprisingly, the leading Indian business houses ended up welcoming emergency because it gave them something that had eluded them for a long time: industrial peace. With the labor unrest a thing of the past, all focus was now on boosting productivity. And along with that, the industrial houses were given a lot of concessions to boost the economy. For the first time, Indian businesses were looking at boosting their exports to Western markets. As the first year of the emergency drew to a close and the gain in industrial output was obvious, the top business houses, Tata and Birla, actually advocated for a switch to a presidential form of democracy rather than the current parliamentary one, because the parliamentary one could be chaotic and unstable. But as the emergency progressed into the second year, some additional factors came into play which gave the big business houses a reason to pause their support for the emergency. The first one was the youth wing of Indira Gandhi's Congress party, which started interfering in the business activities, claiming to be representatives of the state. The second was the demand to open up the economy even further to imports and foreign capital. And this made the Indian business houses nervous because they were happy with the monopolistic setup. So any foreign capital or competition was not something that they really wanted to see in the Indian economy. On the social front, as reflected earlier, dissent was totally curtailed, and this started with most of the opposition leaders being arrested. But the draconian law behind all of this was the Maintenance of Internal Security Act of 1971, which gave the enforcers very broad powers, including indefinite preventative detention, powers of search and seizure without warrants, and surveillance and tapping. Art was another form that underwent a lot of censorship, and movies like Andhi, Kissa Kursi Ka, etc. were banned because they had content which reflected the political situation prevalent at the time. In fact, Indira Gandhi's son, Sanjay Gandhi, who was just a member of parliament, actually confiscated the prints of the movie Kissa Kursi Ka and had these burnt at his Maruti factory in Gurgaon. Talking of Sanjay Gandhi, he almost took on the role of the Crown Prince after the imposition of the emergency. Crown Prince meaning above the law. And one of the most draconian programs during the emergency was the mass sterilization program aimed at controlling India's population. Yep, you heard it right. A program to control India's population by forcing men to undergo vasectomy. And the brutality was carried out to such an extent that police personnel cordoned off villages and virtually dragged the men to surgery. This campaign has a brief mention in Salman Rushdie's novel Midnight's Children. 6.2 million Indian men were sterilized in just 1 year. This was 15 times the number of people sterilized by the Nazis. All in all, 2,000 men died from botched operations. But years before this campaign had started, the US government had begun to put pressure on Indira Gandhi to pursue a more aggressive policy on population control. The thought was that overpopulation would lead to a world of chaos, riots, and war, and if it was not controlled, the world would see half a dozen Vietnams. Essentially, a lot of countries turning communist. Looking back, the mass sterilization drive of 1976 would end up being the most infamous incident within the emergency. By the end of 1976, Indians mostly had reconciled themselves to the fact that the authoritarian regime of Indira Gandhi and her son Sanjay would last at least a couple of decades. But then, out of the blue, on January 18, 1977, Indira Gandhi announced fresh elections across the country. Nobody in her party had the slightest inkling what she was up to. Even her son Sanjay was kept in the dark. And when he heard her radio broadcast, he is supposed to have had an angry showdown with her. So why did she suddenly call for elections? Many believe that the Intelligence Bureau gave her a report that if she called elections soon, she would easily win 330 seats. But there is documentation that in the second week of November of 1976, Indira Gandhi had told her principal secretary, P.N. Dhar, and her information advisor, H.Y. Sharda Prasad, that she would end the emergency and call for elections. And she shared with them that she knew she would lose, but this was something that she had to do. So what happened in November of 1976 that made her change her mind? The closest indication is that in October of 1976, Michael Mackintosh Foot, the United Kingdom leader of the House of Commons, visited Indira Gandhi and had a very frank conversation with her. Now, this is important because Indira Gandhi looked upon him as her elder brother. And the most important point that Michael Foot is supposed to have brought up during their conversation was that Indira Gandhi, by imposing the emergency, had tarnished the legacy of her own father, India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Subsequently, in February of 1977, Indira Gandhi talked to another good friend of hers, US Senator Charles Percy, and said that she knew she would lose the elections badly, but she was worried about her son, Sanjay Gandhi. So it makes it clear that Indira Gandhi definitely did not call the elections thinking that she was going to win. In fact, her fears did come true when her party was booted out of power in the March 1977 elections. In fact, both herself and her son Sanjay lost their respective seats in parliament. And one of the immediate outcomes of the opposition coming to power was the 44th Amendment to the Constitution in 1978, which sought to rectify some of the imbalances created during the emergency. The 44th Amendment addressed the following items. Number 1, the right to life and liberty under Article 21 could not be suspended during an emergency. Second, the Supreme Court's power to review presidential proclamations of emergency was reinforced. And third, it made it required for the president to act on the written recommendation of the cabinet before declaring a national emergency under Article 352. So a prime minister alone could not just recommend emergency. So has the 44th Amendment led to the elimination of the risk of reimposition of emergency in India? To some extent, yes. But a weak link still exists. Barring a few exceptions, the president of the country continues to be connected with the ruling party, essentially becoming a yes person to the party in power. And as long as that setup exists, an overambitious prime minister could get their president to sign on the dotted line. And it is on that note that we end this section of the program. On to the quiz section. Question from the previous episode. Which of the 4 explorers mentioned in that podcast has their picture on the currency note of their country? The New Zealand $5 bill has a picture of Sir Edmund Hillary on the currency note. So the answer is A, Sir Edmund Hillary on the New Zealand dollar. Question for the current episode. Who is the only Indian president to exercise their pocket veto? Pocket veto is holding off signing a bill for an indefinite period. Is it A, Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma, B, Gyani Zail Singh, C, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, or D, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan? Once again, who is the only Indian president to exercise their pocket veto? A, Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma, B, Gyani Zail Singh, C, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, or D, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan? The answer will be provided in the next episode. That's all we have in the current episode. In the next episode, we take a look at the economic miracle that is Singapore, its history, and the factors that led to its phenomenal rise as an economic superpower in East Asia. Till then, stay safe and keep exploring the why in history.